The tension in the Oversight Committee chamber was already thick as molasses by the time Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett entered the room. A quiet murmur passed among staffers, reporters, and interns. Everyone knew something was about to go down, but nobody expected what came next. Senator JD Vance, seated across the aisle, was midway through a sharp-tongued critique on what he called performative outrage from the left. His tone was smug, and his words carried the weight of someone expecting no rebuttal. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She placed her notes on the mahogany desk, adjusted the mic, and waited. Not a sound. Then, with precise calm, she leaned forward. "Senator Vance," she began, her voice cutting through the air like a scalpel, "you seem more concerned with how things look than how things are. But since we're talking performances," the room shifted. Vance leaned back in his chair, brows raised, smirking faintly, as if she'd walked into his trap. Crockett wasn't done. "Let's talk about your record," she said. "The policies you champion don't just hurt my constituents, they hurt yours. But go on, lecture me about accountability." People straightened in their seats. Reporters clicked their pens. Staffers glanced around nervously. JD Vance sat forward now, face losing its color just a touch. Senator Vance adjusted his tie, attempting to mask the fact that Crockett's words had hit a nerve. He opened his mouth to respond, but Jasmine raised a single finger, firm, unwavering. "I listened while you spoke, Senator. Now it's my turn. You claim to defend working Americans, yet you voted against every single bill that would have put food on their tables and roofs over their heads. Shall I read the roll call?" A ripple of stunned silence rolled through the chamber. Vance blinked, thrown off by her poise. Crockett reached down and pulled out a printed sheet of legislation, crisp and highlighted. Ohio Households in Distress Act. Voted no. Emergency Supplemental Nutrition Expansion. Voted no. Rent Relief Package. Voted, say it with me, no. Vance glanced around the room, hoping for support from his colleagues. None came. Even his aides had gone still. Meanwhile, Jasmine continued, her voice rising just enough to command every inch of the chamber, "You have the audacity to question my commitment to justice and equity, when you won't even protect your own voters from poverty?" The entire room froze. All that could be heard was the soft hum of the overhead lights. A journalist's pen dropped to the floor. No one picked it up. JD Vance shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confidence visibly thinning. He opened a folder in front of him, pretending to check notes, buying time. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't waiting. "You call what I do grandstanding? Let me remind you, standing grand is the only option when you're standing up for people who've been ignored, evicted, and silenced for decades." Murmurs flared in the back row. A few heads nodded. Even staffers who typically kept poker faces couldn't hide the flickers of respect. "See, I'm not here to impress donors or polish soundbites for cable news," she continued. "I'm here because the people who sent me don't have lobbyists. They don't have legacy PACs. What they do have is me. And I don't back down." Vance cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Congresswoman, this committee has rules, respect." Crockett shot back, her tone icy. "You just spent 5 minutes mocking my district and dismissing our reality like it was a joke. And now you want civility?" The air vanished from the room. Even the chair of the committee leaned forward slightly, lips pressed into a line. Then Crockett dropped the final blow for the moment. "If truth makes you uncomfortable, Senator, maybe that says more about you than it does about me." Silence. Pure, dead silence. JD Vance leaned back slowly, his mouth pressed into a tight line. For the first time all morning, he said nothing. Jasmine Crockett's gaze never wavered, sharp, steady, surgical. "I've sat through enough of these hearings," she said, her voice calm but electrifying, "where women are talked over, where black voices are dismissed, where truth is treated like an inconvenience. But not today." The quiet was deafening. A camera operator at the back panned in tight. He knew this clip would be viral within the hour. You came in here expecting a spectacle, she continued, pointing gently toward Vance with the back of her pen. But what you didn't expect was accountability. Real, hard, unfiltered accountability. Vance finally broke his silence. Congresswoman Crockett, I don't need a lecture in morality. Oh, I'm not lecturing, she interrupted, her tone cool. I'm fact-checking. You said Americans need fewer regulations, yet you've supported bills that restrict reproductive rights, voting access, and classroom history. Which freedom were you talking about again? The senator opened his mouth, then stopped. The committee chair glanced down at his notes, avoiding eye contact. No one wanted to step in, not yet. You want to talk about freedom? Crockett leaned in. Try living in a zip code where hospitals are closing, water is poisoned, and jobs have vanished. That's not freedom. That's abandonment. The silence deepened. Even the marble walls seemed to hold their breath. JD Vance looked visibly cornered now, his confident demeanor slipping by the second. He attempted a weak chuckle, hoping to reset the tone. I think we've gotten a little off track here. No, Senator, Jasmine Crockett said firmly, this is the track. This is what accountability sounds like when someone finally says what needs to be said in this room. A low murmur of approval rippled from the public gallery. The chair gavelled lightly, more for formality than control. He wasn't about to interrupt this moment. Jasmine's tone shifted, quieter, but somehow more commanding. I don't need applause. I need results. The people back home aren't watching this for entertainment, they're watching because what happens in this room decides whether their kids eat. Whether their lights stay on. Whether their vote counts. She paused. You see, I didn't come here to be comfortable. I came here because comfort is a luxury too many of our constituents can't afford. Vance exhaled slowly. His silence spoke volumes. And I certainly didn't come here, she added, locking eyes with him, to be talked down to by a man who's made a career of punching down. The room froze again. One intern in the corner whispered to another, she's ending him, without even raising her voice. JD Vance had no retort. Jasmine leaned back slightly in her chair and folded her hands. I'm done, Mr. Chair. The chamber held still, uncertain whether to breathe or clap. The chair cleared his throat, clearly rattled. Thank you, Congresswoman Crockett, he said, his voice subdued, almost reverent. JD Vance didn't move. His eyes were fixed downward, blinking slowly, as though trying to process how the floor had been pulled out from under him in front of a packed chamber and a dozen cameras. A long pause stretched across the room. No one wanted to speak next. Then someone, quietly, hesitantly, began to clap. Just one person in the back of the gallery. Then another. And another. It wasn't loud, not at first. But it grew. Not a standing ovation, this wasn't theater. It was sharper than that. It was respect. Earned, not demanded. Crockett didn't smile. She simply nodded once, eyes still forward, as if the weight of what she had said was still being carried. Across the room, Vance finally raised his head. His jaw tightened. He forced a political smile, one that didn't touch his eyes. He leaned toward his mic. Well, he muttered, if Congresswoman Crockett's intent was to put on a show, a voice cut him off. Not Crockett's. It came from a senior committee member. With all due respect, Senator, I think the show ended about 10 minutes ago. And you weren't the star. That shut everything down. JD Vance slowly leaned back, thoroughly outmaneuvered. The atmosphere in the chamber didn't return to normal. It couldn't. Jasmine Crockett's words still hung in the air, vibrating like the last note of a church organ. JD Vance sat motionless, eyes focused on the table before him. His aides, usually quick to hand notes or whisper talking points, stayed frozen, unsure whether movement would make things worse. Meanwhile, Jasmine quietly gathered her papers, methodical, composed. Not triumphant, focused. She hadn't come to grandstand. She came to expose. Outside the chamber, reporters were already scrambling. Phones lit up with push alerts. Crockett silences Vance in viral moment of the year. Oversight hearing turns into masterclass on accountability. Cable news producers race to cut clips. Every major outlet had the footage now, and the room's silence, that eerie, unshakable silence, was the headline. Back inside, the chair tapped his gavel. "We'll take a 10-minute recess," he said. No one argued. As people stood to stretch or flee to their phones, Crockett remained seated. Calm. Grounded. A younger staffer for another representative approached hesitantly. "Ma'am," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I've sat through hundreds of these hearings. That was the first time I ever saw someone say everything we needed to hear." Jasmine looked up, softening slightly. Then it was worth it. Outside the chamber doors, a crowd had already formed, activists, aides, journalists, students. They weren't waiting to see what would happen next. They were waiting to follow her out. When Jasmine Crockett finally stood, the entire chamber seemed to shift with her. She didn't rush. She didn't gloat. She simply slid her chair back, straightened her blazer, and walked, graceful, composed, toward the exit. No cameras flashed inside. It was too quiet for that. But just outside the hearing room, chaos was unfolding. Journalists surrounded the door. Microphones were raised. Boom mics swung into position. Everyone wanted the first sound bite, the headline quote, the follow-up. Crockett stepped into the hallway, and for a moment, the crowd parted, not out of fear, but out of respect. Like they knew she had just walked out of a battlefield, and won. "Congresswoman, do you have a response to Senator Vance's closing remark?" one reporter called out. She stopped. Turned slightly. The senator had plenty of time to make his case. So did I. I'll let the silence speak for itself. That was all she said. No zingers. No grand exit speech. Just truth, held steady. Behind her, more members and staffers poured out into the hall. Some rushed to catch up with her, others simply stood back, watching. Inside the hearing room, JD Vance remained in his seat, arms folded, face unreadable. His aides were whispering frantically now, scribbling notes, already drafting statements to spin the damage. But it was too late. The story had already been written, and Crockett owned every word of it. By the time Jasmine Crockett reached her office, the clip had gone viral. Over 2 million views in under an hour. Hashtags like #CrockettClapback and #Silence in the Chamber were trending nationwide. Her phone buzzed non-stop, calls from colleagues, messages from constituents, interview requests piling up like wildfire. But Jasmine wasn't smiling. She wasn't celebrating. She sat down, calmly removed her earrings, and exhaled. "We didn't win anything today," she told her chief of staff. "We just reminded them we're still in the fight." Across the Capitol, JD Vance's team was in damage control mode. His press secretary was already drafting a statement blaming hyperpartisan theatrics for what had occurred. But even conservative outlets weren't biting. One prominent analyst on a right-leaning network hesitated live on air before admitting, "Look, I don't always agree with her politics, but that was surgical." Senator Vance walked into a buzzsaw. Back in the Oversight Committee chamber, the ripple effects had begun. Other members, especially younger, quieter ones, walked with more resolve. A few even passed Crockett's office just to say, "Thank you." Her team knew what was coming next. The attacks. The headlines. The spin. But Jasmine was ready. She opened her laptop, reviewed the upcoming legislation, and said, "Let them try to change the narrative. We're not done." Outside her office window, a group of students held up a hand-painted sign, "We heard you, Representative Crockett. The next morning, headlines weren't just reporting what happened, they were analyzing it. Crockett redefines congressional debate in one devastating exchange, JD Vance silenced by cold, hard facts. Congresswoman sets new standard. Editorials from both sides of the aisle admitted it. What Jasmine Crockett did wasn't just a mic drop moment. It was a shift. She hadn't gone viral for a one-liner. She'd gone viral for commanding truth, for making silence more powerful than noise. On the House floor, she moved with quiet certainty. Members who once overlooked her now made room when she passed. A few even asked her for guidance before hearings. As cameras trailed her through the Capitol, she paused once more for a brief comment. "I'm not here for headlines," she said, eyes steady. "I'm here to legislate. I'm here to protect people who've been ignored too long. If yesterday helped amplify their voices, then good. But let's be clear, I'm not finished." And with that, she walked off, no entourage, no stagecraft. Just purpose. Meanwhile, Senator JD Vance remained silent in public. No press conferences. No rebuttals. Just a carefully crafted tweet that landed with a thud. For weeks, the moment was replayed in classrooms, law schools, and even civics lessons. Not because of theatrics, but because it showed that conviction, clarity, and courage could still shake the foundations of power. And somewhere, in a small district office back home, a girl watched the clip on repeat. Her eyes wide. Her smile growing. Maybe one day, she whispered, I could speak like her.